we are delighted to welcome you today to Ask the Pricing Expert. Of course, our pricing expert today is Patrick Campbell, the one and only Patrick Campbell. Patrick is the founder and CEO of ProfitWell, the suite of tools that plug right into your subscription management system and provide turnkey solutions to reduce your churn, optimize your pricing, and ensure revenue recognition is audit proof. So Patrick, we all heard from you yesterday. Any other words you want to say about ProfitWell or anything?
No, I told you yesterday I wanted to hear this intro every day, so I got it again today. It's great. Love it. Love it. Pumping me up.
Well, we loved having you yesterday.
Yeah, everyone else. Yesterday we talked about a bunch of different ideas around pricing, all kinds of different things, not only like visually how to set things up, but also in terms of like what works and sometimes what doesn't. Everyone's mileage is going to vary a little bit, but my background that was kind of talked about. I've been working on pricing now for over a decade in terms of helping companies with their pricing. My specialty is more in subscriptions than anything, but in the game of pricing, everything's very, very applicable across different industries, unless it's like pure commodity-based pricing. And I'm not saying like, oh, you have a very competitive market. I'm saying like, if you're selling gold or something very commodity-ish, the advice isn't really much more than follow the market. So with that, maybe what we could do, Sarah, is like we have a couple of examples to walk through, but maybe like questions around pricing from yesterday. We kick things off, and then I can go through a couple of examples that were submitted. And if you didn't have a chance to submit your pricing, but you wanted feedback on it, you can also submit it right in the chat. So yeah, any questions from yesterday or any questions just on pricing in general? James, Jim, you're new to the game here, so feel free to ask those questions.
Yes, this is great. And again, I want to set the tone for everybody. We don't have a deck today. This is totally live. This is your question. This is your chance to ask your pricing question of Patrick. So if you have questions left over from yesterday, chat them in. If you have examples you didn't get to submit ahead of time, no worries. We have 3 queued up, but we're happy to take more. So just go ahead and chat them in. I think, Patrick, I'd like to start with just a really quick poll, just to get everybody kind of warmed up. And I want to know about your core solution offering, because this came up a lot in the emails post webinar to me. So just tell us, where are you at? Tell us about how you price your product. Are you subscription based with recurring fees? Do you have one-time or fixed costs? Are you multiple products with variable features within each? Is your pricing fairly simple, or is it something else in which you need to chat it in? But just take a moment, vote. You can vote for more than one. So we know that one size does not fit all, as we talked about yesterday, but just let us know how you are pricing your product today. Good. A few more people voting. Take another minute here. Good. I know somebody else. Good. All right, last chance to vote. I'm closing it off. 3, 2, 1. Good deal. All right, let's look at where we're at. Okay, so 33% are subscription-based recurring fees, 33% one-time or fixed costs, 75% multiple products with variable features within each one. And that was a very, very common question. How do I price my product effectively and simplify the presentation when I've got so many products? And we're going to talk about that today. 8% said my pricing is pretty simple and straightforward, and 8% said it's something else, and look in the chat. So let me look in the chat. Let's see what we've got here. Oh, no explanation in there, but if you want to offer explanation, glad to take a look at that. But Patrick, what do you think?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think just in terms of which aspect.
Were the results surprising to you, or you find that fairly common?
Yeah, I think it's kind of dependent on like the audience as well. But yeah, I think things like the subscription model are super powerful, and I think that like it's one of those things where if you're not thinking of a subscription, like there's a huge advantage to adding it to your kind of stack there. But you should have different elements to even all businesses should have different elements, because people buy in different ways sometimes. Kind of have to guide them sometimes, but yeah, it's super helpful.
Good, good, good. So do you want me to go ahead and share my screen? Do you want to drive for these examples or driving in?
Yeah, barring any questions that are coming in, we got one that came in. Yeah, I can totally drive. I think maybe we'll handle Lauren's question here first. Sorry you had to leave. She said, sorry you had to leave the webinar. Not a problem at all. Did you talk about the pros cons of having a customized pricing strategy based on the client's needs versus standard rates? So Lauren, I think like there's two things here to kind of think about. I think that when you think about your pricing, and it depends a bit on your product, Lauren, but overall, I think I'm a big fan of like understanding your personas and understanding your segments and having some standardization for that particular subset. So a mistake I always see is like, agencies or marketing agencies, these types of things, they do hourly rates, like, and that's hourly is not really where the value is. And I think it's like they have some standard packages, and then based on your customer interaction, assuming you have some prospect interaction, then you can do some customization. And so put this another way that's probably a little bit clearer to understand. If you have a market or you have a product that can be pretty customized on a customer by customer basis, I recommend making sure 80% of that product is pretty standard, or that pricing is pretty standard. And then the last 20% can be different for every single person, because you want to kind of fit it as much as humanly possible. I think if you get into a game where like everything's custom, unless you're doing enterprise deals or unless you're doing something that has to be bespoke on a customer by customer basis, it's really hard to get your hands around making sure you're optimizing your pricing because you don't necessarily have actual levers to pull. Now, all of that goes out the window if you're in your first kind of iteration of your pricing. First iteration of pricing, you should be doing experimentation, figuring stuff out, hearing reactions from people, those types of things. That's kind of what you should be focused on.
Good deal.
Cool.
Great.
Let's jump in. So this
All right.
this first example,
Do you want me to share my screen? Or did you
nope,
want
I got it because it's easier for me to drive if I do it. This is the first example, right? Or is this the third?
Hold on. I think I tried to jump here and
That's okay.
Oops. So I'm going to stop sharing and let you do it. So apologies there.
Yep. But is this the first example?
Yes.
Right?
Yes. That's
okay.
Great.
And I think the person, from my understanding, they stripped out all of the identifiable information, right?
Yes. So this is one.
Okay.
This is coming from Jacob, and Jacob created this just for us to review because a lot of pricing is proprietary. So I really respect that.
Totally.
So let's see. Obviously he has a lot of products here, and so that's his question of how do you present a cohesive pricing presentation when you've got so many things. You can see there's a lot of upselling between this two.
Yep.
And Jacob, feel free to jump in and help me out here if there's other things you want Patrick to know about your model. But I think he's just looking for some overall strategic help here.
Yeah. So I think there's a couple things to kind of think about. So one, you have some, recurring, fees, it looks like, in terms of your pricing. And then you have, it looks like potentially some, more one-time. I think the thing to think about here, like when I'm just looking literally at the outline here, because that's kind of what you've given us, there's a lot of complexity here, right? And what I mean by that is like you have this plan, and again, this might make total sense if we understood the context, but even if I understood the context, it'd be like, there's a lot of choices here. And one thing I'd recommend, because I think it came through on a couple of the other pages, is that if you can kind of figure out how to make limit the amount of choices that someone has to truly go through, it's best. And it's a little bit of kind of like a Goldilocks, problem where it's like, if you only offered one option, that's not ideal, like we talked about yesterday. But if you're offering up lots of different options and lots of different things you can pick, it becomes a taxing experience, even if you've had a bunch of conversations with the customer or the prospect beforehand. And then this is just them coming in and finally picking things. And so what I would potentially do is maybe try to bring this down to, maybe kind of bundling some of these products together, maybe bundling some of the choices so there's not just so many choices. And then the other thing you got to think about, and this is one thing that might make total sense when the context is there, is like if you're offering up 8 different options, right? even if there's a totally valid reason for it, where it's like literally like you get 10 things with this one, you get 20 things with this one, 30 things, etc. I would still simplify that even further by potentially adding bins, right? Like, hey, you get this much in between, so you can kind of simplify the options here. But yeah, this is James is saying it reads kind of like a restaurant menu, if that makes sense. Yeah, so this, and Jacob's coming in. We have lots of hardware. With that hardware comes recurring tied to my 60 or 70 items. You're looking into bundling. Yeah, so that's the biggest thing I focus on is like, I don't know, like again, if it's hardware, right? Like there's certain aspects of hardware where like, let's say, and this is a good forcing function for anyone, right? Let's say like it doesn't make any sense to buy product A without product B. Let's just say that like makes sense. You're never going to buy, I'm going to make up an example that all of a sudden destroys it. So you never will buy product A without product B. Well, in that case, what I might want to do, and this was hopefully helpful, Jacob, I might want to incrementally make the price of product A a little bit higher or a little bit more, and then just include product B, right? And then all of a sudden, I don't have to choose how many product A, how many product B, but I can go, I choose product A, and then you have a value driver where you're like, oh, includes product B for free, right? And it's really not free, but it's all of a sudden a more marketable thing. And there might be some opportunity there versus your competition where it's like, oh, interesting, like they charge you on, yes, this is more expensive, but they charge you differently for product B or separately for product B for your competitors, whereas Jacob's business includes it. So I think that's one area where you can bundle. And then depending on the type of hardware, there's areas where you can like truly bundle, where you're like, here is option one that has a little bit of A, a little bit of C, a little bit of D, but that can get a little bit more complicated depending on how different your customers are. So long story short, the one tactic that I think is useful for everyone is sometimes instead of taking something out, you want to include it, but just raise the overall price. And then the other thing is there's a limit to the number of options you can give someone, even if you've had a bunch of conversations. If I look at this, I'd be like, if I'm not a repeat customer, I'm a new customer, I get overwhelmed, right? Just kind of looking at all of these options. And, what you can do maybe, Jacob, is let's say you have, 4 different types of customers, and one type of customer, they always are looking for products A, F, and G. Another type of customer, they're always looking for products A, B, D, and F or whatever. And then you can kind of simplify and at least have a conversation with them and then, come back out. Yeah, exactly. So James is bringing up a good point too. But yeah, those are kind of the 2 comments I'd have. So Jacob, hopefully that's helpful, but redirect me or ask some direct questions too if it's helpful. And hopefully this is helpful for the group as well.
Good. I love the idea of combining things and raising the overall price, which that's got to be great for quotas too.
Totally. Well, and what's kind of funny, and we all are susceptible to this, if you've ever purchased a product that has free shipping, the shipping is not actually free. One of the companies I worked at between Google and starting ProfitWell was an e-commerce startup. And literally on the back end of the pricing, like every order just added $15. And that was the list price because that $15 was for quote unquote free shipping. And so that's something that can be really helpful, is that you want to use marketing a little bit sometimes for like offering something for free. Doesn't necessarily mean you have to lose that margin. You can just add it to the rest of the price because that revenue is going to come from somewhere essentially. Yeah, and then Luciana, I think, spoke to just the hosts and the panelists, but they brought up a really good point where as a customer, I would appreciate the value of having a solution proposed to me. And so it's really interesting. So Jacob, probably the spectrum for that, and you know your customer better than I do, of course, but if you have a customer who is very, very specific and they know exactly what they want and they're used to, it's kind of like if I went to a hardware store and I was working on the same project every week for a year, I would know exactly where to go. I want 5 of this, I want 10 of that, etc. If it's that type of customer, having a little more complexity here is totally fine. If it's a customer who like doesn't know anything or is like new to whatever you're selling, then you want to kind of simplify as much as possible. Cool. Want to move on to the next one, Sarah?
Yeah, and Sheldon has a question too. How do you decide on a price for a product or service? Like who gets to determine that coaching program costs $2,000, for example?
That's a really great question. So there's typically three main ways to price if you're not a commodity product. Cost plus, competitive-based pricing, or what's called value-based pricing. Now, what you want to do is what's called value-based pricing. I'll describe that in a second, but let me explain why cost plus and why competitive-based pricing is actually really problematic. So first up, cost plus pricing is exactly how it sounds. You determine your costs and then you slap an arbitrary margin on top of it, whatever margin you think is good, and you did cost plus pricing. The reason that this is really problematic is unless you're in a commoditized good or an extremely competitive space, and when I say extremely competitive, not you're thinking about your competitor all the time, but truly, truly extremely competitive, where it's almost like a commodity type product, your customers do not care about your costs. They care about their costs, right? I said that yesterday. They care about their costs, and your value might be extremely disproportionate to your costs, right? And so what I mean by that is all of a sudden, like if you think of like Salesforce.com or many software companies, right? The incremental value per user might be like $1, right? $1 per month, but they might be charging hundreds of dollars per month because the value is so high, right? And so cost plus pricing is not great. Competitive based pricing, and for Jacob, because I think there's a physical product aspect to the thing you're doing if you're talking about hardware, sometimes with cost plus pricing, because you're so worried about covering your costs that you don't necessarily have the confidence to like I don't know who would have the confidence to be like, I'm going to put a 10,000x markup on this, right? It's hard because you're thinking so much about the costs and you're like, well, double the cost, it seems so high that you limit the amount that you might actually be able to get. Not in all things, but in some things. Competitive based pricing is you look at your competitors and then you kind of decide how you want to strategically be put in the context of your competitor. And the reason this is problematic is that your competitors, you're assuming that your competitor has done their pricing homework. I've been talking about pricing long enough to know, I guarantee your competitor has not done their homework. No one does pricing research. Hopefully the people on the call do some pricing research, but it's one of those things that we don't actually think of working on our pricing. And so your competitors probably haven't done their homework. In addition to that, you're assuming you're selling to the exact same type of customer, the exact same type of product, which normally your personas, your deal flow, all these other things are normally a bit different. And so it's not that those data points aren't important, but they should be secondary to value-based pricing data. And what value-based pricing data is basically, you go to your customers, you talk to them, you actually talk to them, which I know can be scary, but people know things cost money, right? And normally they really want to have a conversation if you're asking about pricing. And you can do this through survey data, you can do this through having conversations, but you're basically trying to figure out where the willingness to pay is. Now, how do you actually do that? Well, the human brain, we think about pricing as a spectrum. It's really difficult for us as humans to answer a question like, how much is this worth? Because that's not how we think about value. We think about value very spectrum based, where I know this water bottle is worth less than this computer. And the way that I know that is, one, I've purchased these in the past before, so there's some anchoring there, but also the actual utility I get from this computer is very, very different than the utility I get from this water bottle. And if I lose this water bottle, I'll be sad because it's a Yeti water bottle that I know costs like $50, but I won't be as sad as if I lose my computer because this is $1,000, right? And so we can take advantage of that. And this is something that like I didn't come up with, like psychologists, economists have been studying, how humans think about value for decades. But we can take advantage of this by asking ranged questions. So what I mean by that is I can ask Sarah, well, at what point would this computer be so expensive that you would never consider purchasing it? Or if I'm on the phone with a coaching prospect, I can say, hey, well, we're thinking about our pricing right now. At what point would it be so expensive, like you wouldn't return my call or my email? And they'll struggle a little bit sometimes, but they'll eventually give you a bit of an answer. And then the other thing that you can do is you can say, well, at what point is this such a good price that you'll sign up today? And then they'll give you an answer. And then all of a sudden I have a range, right? Now, if I do that across 10 to 15 people that are kind of similar in my segment, all of a sudden I start to have some context. I start to have some understanding of like where I should be. And then I can look at that data, look at my costs, look at my competitors and see, oh, interesting. Like I actually can charge more or I can have to charge less. And the biggest issue that people have is maybe that value-based data comes back as $100. The cost is $120 and the competitor is at $80. A lot of entrepreneurs, what they'll do is they'll go, oh my God, we got to put it at 75, which obviously makes no sense. Or we got to put it at 125 because we have to cover our costs. What you should do in that instance, you should take a giant step back and go, something is fundamentally wrong with my business. I'm either going against the wrong customer, or I'm using the wrong product, or something is up, right? Because normally you should find that your, value-based price is much higher. And most entrepreneurs or most operators are not willing to charge high enough prices because we fear not getting conversion. And what you find is that actually when you do some research, people are willing to pay a lot higher than you think. So long story short, Sheldon, hopefully that's helpful. There's other ways, there's other methodologies you can use, but that's one that I think is easy enough to not only explain on a call like this, but also it's easy enough to implement literally tomorrow. And you could do it at scale too, depending on how many people you want to talk to. The last thing I'll say there, understand the limits of your data, right? When you're just starting out and you're just trying to figure out where are we, you should be thinking about, am I a $10 product? Am I a $100 product? Am I a $1,000 product? Don't worry about, am I a $10 product or am I $11 product? And the proportions here, matter. So for example, for Jacob, there's between $10 and $11 for his price might be significant, right? But don't worry, in his case, don't worry about $10 and $10.01, in terms of a price. And the reason I bring that up is because you probably don't have the volume where a small percentage increase is all of a sudden going to change your life, right? And the other piece of that is when you're thinking about these price points, know that they can change over time, and you're probably going to underprice someone a little bit because you're learning, and you're probably going to overprice someone, but you should be on the quickest path to learning, and having those conversations helps a lot. And you should kind of know in the range, and then you can kind of optimize from there. So Sheldon, I wrote a book on pricing. It's free online. It's at priceintelligently.com. Which is our old domain. It's also on ProfitWell.com somewhere, but it'll be a little bit harder to find. If you just go to priceintelligently.com and scroll to the bottom, you can grab that book. It's 100 and some pages, so it's not like a crappy ebook that's only a page or two. It's a pretty comprehensive book you can check out that goes through some of the stuff we talked about. Let's do one more question and I'll jump back into an example. Does that work, Sarah?
Yeah, absolutely. And I always had a boss that talked about emotional pricing, so I love that very detailed example. And James chatted into the problem with commodity pricing is that if the purchaser believes it's a commodity, then you are going to get beat up on price, and they're going to treat you like a commodity, ask for huge discounts, just like what you were sharing. So he says he's a professional purchaser. So, and use that technique. So very interesting to hear from the buyer side as well.
Totally. And it's one of those things, just to comment on what James said, it's when you're a professional buyer and your procurement, you're using all the opposite tactics, right? And so, when you have someone who's trying to push you into a commodity, if you truly are in that space, you're not like gold or something, but you're truly in a very competitive market, my instinct in those cases is to basically commit to the commodity and then find other things you can charge for to make up for it, right? And this is for example, HubSpot and Marketo, two, HubSpot or marketing software products, right? Up through the IPOs, HubSpot's now clearly one, at least in my opinion, but it's one of those things where up through the IPO, they were trying to throw deals at each other and trying to beat each other and any discount counts. And a lot of buyers took advantage of this, but the one thing HubSpot did really well is that they made sure, one, that they had this value metric that grew. So as the customer grew, they were going to end up paying more, but then they also did a lot of add-ons, right? So if James was coming and saying, hey, I got to get this discount, I'd be fine, I can discount this thing I'm probably not going to be able to really charge a lot for anyways. But all of a sudden, I'm not going to charge for this other piece. I'm not going to discount for this other piece, right? So knowing what to discount, that's where you can get into some repartee with the likes of James out there. Awesome. But yeah, let's look at the next one.
Yeah. Let's go to the next example. So this one was submitted
this
by. Yes. So that was submitted by Jill. And cool. She writes in, she's a direct mail marketing agency working with small to medium-sized businesses to help them promote their business through postcard mailing. I very much appreciate that. I came from the publishing industry. And her pricing model is they price per piece. So based on the size of the postcard ordered, plus they have volume discounts. Plus, as you know, when you get into direct mailings, there's a whole bunch of other fees that come into play. So she wanted us to take a look at her proposal and then give her some feedback.
Yeah. Yeah, so I like how, so this is kind of cool. I imagine your business, like you very specifically put this image behind because you're selling this to a dental place. And so yeah, I think this is really cool. I think like that type of stuff, it goes a long way. What we found is like if you can, and I know it sounds kind of like, well, why should it matter? But like doing little personalizations inside your pricing, like sometimes what we'll do is like, we'll have built a relationship with someone or we have talked to them like a year ago. In those types of like contracts, we'll always put like friends and family discount, like, oh, we know you, we've known you for a long time, we want to hook you up. Now admittedly, like the list price went up and that discount was in there, but it's like these little personalizations, I think, are really, really helpful. And right now, like it's even better if you pulled this from OZ Dental's page, but even then, like it doesn't really matter if you did or not, because all of a sudden it feels like personalized. So that's really cool. And I think it's something that not enough people do. And it's so easy. It's so easy like to do that in like, especially with something like Qwilr, I don't work there, but like to plug Qwilr a little bit, but like, but it's so easy to do it, even if it's like sending over an email, like personalize a bit. So the other thing I like is like, the other thing is like you're personalizing it in the sense of like you're reinforcing the value. So combine proven direct mail with the power of Google Display Ads and X-ray cards, you got this value, this is what's going on. I think the thing that I don't like though, is that like, and I don't know if you have a conversation with this person before this happens. Like if we had a conversation before, maybe this is fine, but like, let's say we didn't really have much of a conversation, you're just sending this over. All of a sudden it's 30% off smart marketing, right? So we have best practices that your proposal includes custom postcard. That's awesome. Very cool. Defending the value. And then like 30% off, right? And it's one of those, and maybe I don't understand. I think this is Jill's. Maybe I don't understand, but it's one of those things where you're kind of leading with the discount. And if it's not something we'd already agreed on, it's like, you're already kind of like discounted, right? And a good example is like GoToMeeting, the Zoom predecessor. I think they're still around, of course. But I remember like I had trouble with my account and we had like a bunch of seats because that's what we used before Zoom. And I remember I had to like actually physically call and literally, I didn't ask, but literally the first thing the guy said was, hey, are you GoToMeeting user? And I was like, yep. I just have a question. Oh, would you like 10% off of your account for like blah, blah, blah. And it was like, I was calling for support and they were already discounting, which was kind of wild, right? And so that's a thing that I would think about. Like, and if we had already talked and agreed on 30% off or something like that, then it's totally fine. Because I want to see that I got what I agreed on, if that makes sense.
Patrick, I'm just going to interject here. If you go back up to the smart marketing, what might be a better option is, this sounds like a benefit to doing business with this company. So, maybe one of the features that they offer. So, Jill, I would say maybe use an accordion widget here, and say our services or something smart marketing. And you've got some very powerful bullets in there, drive more traffic to your website, increase response rates by 50%. But as Patrick was saying, your discount is taking away from some of those benefits. So maybe turn it into, here's what we can offer you, make it an accordion widget so then people can see more.
Yeah, totally. And I think that's great. And okay, so here are your proposals for review. Okay, so we got the smart marketing package. Yeah, now that I'm looking at it, it feels like I probably had a conversation, quote unquote, with Jill before I got this. And so if we had agreed on 30%, then like, great, that's probably what I would want to see first, Jill, is like, did I get what I agree on, right? And so coming down here, print and mail, 6 by 11 full size, blah, blah, blah. Got an accordion here. Okay, awesome. 5,000 cards, one drop, one design, printing and address services, base fee. Yeah, Jill's letting us know that we do have a conversation. Flat rate marketing mail pieces. Yeah, this is interesting. Okay, gotcha. Okay, interesting. Okay, sorry, I'm just thinking through. There's a lot. I probably had a conversation with her. I did have a conversation with Jill in this example because that's what she said. There's a lot of options here, right? And I think what happens, so Jill, she's like, oh, it's too complicated. It's not necessarily too complicated if we had a conversation about it. What kind of gets complicating is like if we agreed on certain things, when I come to this page, I don't have like upsell opportunities, right? So I think the design is already happening. and then I can kind of change the impressions. And then there's this little thing down here, right? So all of a sudden, like, I'm really kind of bogged down in these details. And I can look at this other package, which has more. But let's say I know I only want, 5,000 cards, right? Still give me a couple things I can choose here where I can all of a sudden go, oh, I would like priority support. I would like XYZ, whatever. I would like, a rush order or whatever it ends up being. Like, because this kind of stuff, like, it's already included, right? Printing and address services, right? So maybe what you could do is you could almost include that up here, or include that all as one thing. Like, all smart marketing packages include this, this, and this, and it's not like it's just one. The quantity is one because I bought my smart marketing package, and then give me a couple add-ons for like rush service or whatever, right? And that's actually a really interesting thing we didn't talk about yesterday. We talked about like things. A really fascinating thing I've seen in some e-commerce websites is basically it's not rush as in I get it guaranteed 2 days earlier. I'm paying for a more extreme or a faster type of postal or UPS shipping, but it's rush in the sense of we will prioritize your order an extra $10. And it's one of those things where sometimes it's $5 and sometimes like I'm like, well, technically you're basically paying for the handling time to be small. And so there's something there that like Jill probably already just kind of fits within your business, but you might be able to get 100 extra bucks, 200 extra bucks, $250, whatever it is. So that's something to kind of think about. But that's the thing I would say is like, make sure that I have some options to pick. Don't just, if this stuff's already included, just like include it as one line. And then the stuff that I actually can pick where I can pay you more money, those are the things that I should have on separate lines.
Good feedback. Good feedback.
Yeah. And this is kind of very similar, right? Yeah. The other thing is like here with the number of display ads, I don't understand your business as well as you do, obviously. But the thing with display ads kind of thing, it's like, I don't know. Yeah, my instinct, I don't know, this might get trouble here, not trouble, but like my instinct is like, there's some more premium here. This seems like you're just kind of getting paid for maybe the actual, like what you're paying Google. So if this is basically like, I don't know, like your cost, there probably should be some sort of like recontextualization of this. That's like, that shows me the value because you're running it, right? And I think that's what you're trying to do here. But it's one of those things where like, I'm just looking at this as like costs. And I don't know if like what your margin is here. But if you recontextualize it as like, we are going to manage, and this is kind of what you're doing with the whole thing, but we're going to manage your campaign and optimize it and all these other things, then all of a sudden it might be more powerful and you miit be able to get a higher price. This almost looks like you're commoditizing what you're selling. So you might not be, but that's just something to kind of think about. Yeah, and then this is good. I like that you have like turnaround times. I like that you included a testimonial down here. The turnaround time, this feels a little like SLA, meaning like terms of service. I think this could actually be like a value proposition, so might just want to consider pushing it up here because I know how it is working with like smaller businesses where it's like, everything is like, they won't get back to you. Then they commit to it and they're like, why isn't it here tomorrow? Right. That type of a thing. And so that might be something that you can actually like push into your payment for the rush fee that we kind of talked about. But yeah, those are some thoughts, just kind of free form.
Yeah, terms and service also can be a foldable block, Jill. So, terms and conditions. So if people want to read it, which it looks like you do have one down there, but, if people want to read the postal turnaround times, great. If they don't, just get them to accepting or whatever the next thing is that you want them to know.
Yeah.
She did
the other thing, oh, go ahead, sorry.
Did you see her comment? Second option is a multi-touch option. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, but I think for my point on the display ads is like, you're still paying it. So I guess I'm trying to articulate it, and I think I don't know how to articulate it. So it's great when I'm trying to articulate something, right? I think the thing is like, I don't know what your cost is, because like for impressions, right? I understand it's not a pay-per-click, but it's one of those things where you have to pay per like a CPM or like something like that, right?
Mhm.
The way you've positioned it, like, I don't know how many 360,000 impressions is, but it feels as if like there's an opportunity to get more margin by recontextualizing, right? Like this is like the because especially like I know a lot of small businesses don't understand like online advertising, even if it's impressions or pay per clip, and so there's something there where it's like make me feel like it's a bigger deal from a value prop, and I'm going to get
Mhm.
more and kind of go from there. Yeah, more value, right? Yeah, show more
Yeah.
value of like I get to so a good example is, and you got to be careful because like there's a point where it's like they're not going to truly get the value, and then they're going to not want to renew or do it again. But there's a company called Endurance, and they own like all kinds of different like hosting companies, like HostGator, and like a very like long tail like pizza shops will host their website with them. They're kind of getting eaten by like Squarespace and stuff like that. But the reason I bring it up is because I was talking to one of their folks over there, and they sell like load balancing for like $5 a month to like pizza shops, and it's a little like it's they're not really selling load balancing because I doubt there's any pizza shop unless it's like Domino's or something that needs load balancing, meaning they're getting so much traffic they're balancing the load of that traffic. But it's a comfort thing, right? It's a comfort because they're selling like, hey, if you have too much traffic, we'll make sure your website always stays up, right?
Mm.
Now, honestly, like no pizza shop needs load balancing, but it is selling that comfort. And so there's something there where it's like, it's a value of like, we're going to take care of you. We're going to get you like almost like the billboards that they see around town. We're going to get you on every online billboard, that type of a thing. And depending on their sophistication, that might be a bit much, but something to think about.
That's great. And while before we move off of this one, Jill, my last comment would be: there's lots of research out there how physical mailings and digital advertising can work together to increase brick and mortar, or so leverage some of those stats of why should somebody opt in for that Google ad, upsell. So again, showing the value and showing how that can really boost their postcard response if people are also seeing it online and vice versa.
The other thing I was just talking to, it sounds like you have more of a postcard or custom mailing agency, like you said. The other thing I'm seeing, it's kind of like following. There's companies out there that are like they kind of, if I wanted to do a bunch of postcard marketing, I could go to them if I had the designs and stuff. And obviously, you feel that value. Taking over their SMS marketing might be a really interesting play as well. I don't know if you want to get into the game of like being a marketing agency for these companies, Jill, but like SMS is very similar to postcards where they're not doing it. They should be, it's local. So unless they're very savvy, they're not like using Klaviyo or something like that. But it's something that you could definitely pitch them of like, hey, we'll set up your SMS marketing campaigns for your current, customers and things like that. And not like the appointments and stuff like for a dental office, but like actually like, hey, we have $10 off X, that type of thing, those types of offers, because that's something that they would pay for that is going to have much, much higher margins, I would argue as well.
That's great. Good. All right, some excellent feedback. If you have questions for Patrick, go ahead and chat them in. Patrick, I want to move on to our third example.
Yep.
And this one feels a little bit more complicated. So I'm just going to read you the email, make sure I understand it. So first of all, this one comes from a service provider. They have an internal PM costs that are mostly based on the hours spent on preparation and administration of projects. They are a premium provider and provide very strong support, which includes materials and expert advice on how to run events. It sounds like too, this particular example, they are doing both live events, like in-person events, but also virtual events and in-meeting support. So it makes the product offering a little bit more complex. And so it's a hybrid offering. So looking for some feedback and support on how can they present this more comprehensively.
Yeah. So this is interesting.
And this I'm sorry, this is from Luciana. So there is a chat in.
Perfect.
More, yeah.
Yeah, let me just read that quick. Interpretation for events like meeting. Blah, 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 blah. Oh, I see. Yeah. Okay, very cool. I've spoken at a lot of conferences in Brazil actually, and and I think Luciana's in Brazil. So what's really interesting about Brazilian conferences, for those of you who don't know, so Brazil, it's in a lot of, like, if you go speak in Europe or you go speak in other parts of Latin America, you can speak in English and people, they know a bit of English, to kind of follow along in most places. In Brazil, because it's so large, everything's Portuguese, right? And so when you go speak at a conference, they will have these simultaneous translators, and it's really cool because they'll ask you questions about like technical terms that you use, but they're basically translating in real time what you're saying on stage, and then everyone's wearing these translation headsets at a conference. And I've never seen it before. So, anyways, it's pretty cool. But okay. So I think here, let me see. So there's a really interesting thing that Luciana's doing here, and it's one of those things that, depending on your company, it's helpful or it's like distracting. And what I mean by that is, okay, so let's say like it's something that I presume I've already talked to the customer, right? So like here, because there's some detail proposed by, Debbie, and I'm sending this over. So if I've had a couple conversations with you, I've collected a bunch of information, all these other things, you got to be careful of where you put the actual number. Because what'll happen is, and we've learned this the hard way, is like, all of a sudden I'm like, well, we just talked. I just want to know the price. Where is the price? Where is the price? Where is the price? Right. And I'm scrolling through to find the price. Right. So you got to do a balance, because I also don't think you should put the price right at the top, because all of a sudden it's like, hey, I want to remind them we have value. We're providing a lot of value, right? We're doing this. And so one thing you might want to do, if I've had a conversation with this prospect already and I've found details, is kind of like provide a summary here, but provide a summary that's a little bit more deal termy, right? Like specific, right? So here, this is probably like something that you could put into any proposal. Give me something that's a little bit more specifics. And you can kind of see that a little bit here, but I want to kind of like sit here and go, oh, this is really interesting. This is really useful, right? Yep, I have been heard. This isn't just everything that's on their marketing website. I have been heard. They clearly tailored this proposal just for me. And then, yeah, some of this stuff might be, kind of repeat for every single customer. And then I might see the price kind of in between that. So just something to think about. You know your customers better than I would, but something to think through. Because you've already sold me, right? Theoretically, that's why we're getting to a proposal, or I'm mostly sold, so I just want to see the price. And then when I get to the price, I like the year investment. That's good. That's very good. So these little contextual things can actually be really helpful, right? Because even if I'm like, I know it's a little bit of a sales thing to tell me it's my investment, it still puts it in my head, and I'm still like, yep, I am investing, in making sure that my event is great. Let's see here. So, yep, this is open. So I got this hybrid event, English, Korean, 8 full days, 2 half days, 4 extra time fees per project, number of hours, 5 days. Yeah, so this is interesting, right? So I think that, I think what's interesting is it's kind of like the feedback I was giving before, right? I do think it's really important for you to have these details, because I presume these are details you negotiated and talked with the person or whoever's like, wants the proposal. But I think the one thing here is like, it's, even though I've pretty much negotiated everything, I want something that gives me the ability to get a little bit of an upsell here. And I'm not sure, I feel like the accommodations might be included. Like if you're giving me the choice of not to include accommodation, it's like one of those things where I'm like, I don't know. But, and maybe it's a little confusing, because maybe that person, it's not clear here I'm choosing to have the on-site manager or not, right? And so it's one of those things where, like, even if I am, it would be useful to like have this breakdown. Absolutely, don't worry on that front, but also give me something that I can like, yeah, we should have that. Let me click it and add that to the price, right? And this gets into, and I think you actually have a really powerful opportunity here, Deborah and Luciana, because what's really kind of interesting here is I've already like kind of committed that this is going to cost thousands of dollars, if not tens of thousands of dollars. And there's this old kind of adage, it's an old example of like when someone goes and buys a suit, They always sell you the suit first, the expensive item, the $1,000 suit, the few $100 suit, and then they upsell you the ties and the shirts and the belts and all these other things, because after agreeing to spend $1,000 on something, a $50 shirt doesn't seem like that big of a purchase, right? So we've had this conversations. We have a really complex project that we're going to do. I see everything that I care about here that we talked about, but then give me the equivalent of the shirt or the equivalent of the belt, something that's like, oh, an extra $1,000 for, I don't know, you know your business, but an extra $1,000 for this thing? Yeah, not a problem. Let's add it. Oh, an extra $500 for this thing? Yeah, sounds good. Let's just add it on there. We're in for a penny. We're in for a pound, right? You want to give me something, but I think this is great. I think this is awesome. I think this is actually a really good example of like a truly full proposal that some of the other folks can kind of learn. Yeah, and this is where the additional services are. This is where like maybe there's some of these things that aren't included that like you talked about and the person kind of felt, I don't know if we should include it. Those should be the add-ons that you offer, right? All these additional services are great, but it's like, you know, you'll know in the sales process, and this is a good lesson for everybody. In the sales process, there's the thing that they want, the thing you agree to, and then there's the things that they were like, oh, it's kind of nice to have. They asked a lot of questions about it, but it didn't end up making the final quote. Those are the things to put up here of like, okay, cool. Here's the things you're kind of waffling on, because I guarantee you it's not going to be every customer, but I guarantee you some of the customers are going to surprise you. And you're going to get the proposal thinking, oh, I'm going to get $28,000. And then all of a sudden you're going to have $32,000. You'll be like, oh, awesome. They added these extra things that aren't really hard for us to add. But yeah, this was great. This was really good. I think that last part, and then just kind of personalizing the top a little bit more, and maybe adding a little bit more of a specific summary and getting to the price a little earlier, and then putting the other stuff below. I think that's something to kind of debate, but there's probably no right answer there. It's just more of something to experiment with. But yeah, I really like this. Good job.
Yeah, this is nicely done. My question is on the upselling services, the additional services. Is it possible to make that interactive where the client can select they want them, or does it really depend? Like, is it so specific that you have to bid it out? That would be one question that I had. But
yeah, I'm sure there's things that are like not like for example, like yeah, I'm sure there's some pieces here that are like, I don't know, like I don't know their business, and I'll say this and then they'll be like, no, that doesn't work, right? But I think that there's some things where like everyone should have some services or some like some things that you can add that are easy for you, worth the money if they select it, but are things that like they didn't agree to already, right? Because all of a sudden it's just like you'll get questions about it, or you'll get people who just choose it, right? Because they're like, oh, that's worth it. And you have to offer it to them. It's similar to as a consumer, always ask for a discount or always ask for a better price. Not because like you're necessarily going to get it, but you're going to get it enough that all of a sudden you're going to save some costs, or you're going to save some money here. Luciana, we would like specific feedback for the PM fees, which applies to even simpler projects. So interpreting rates, PM fees, and meeting support. These three are the basic pillars. Should we break down PM fees from the rest of the project? This is our differential with some clients out question us saying they can do this internally. Yeah, everyone says they can do it internally because they want to save money, and then they can't. So PM fees, project management fees. Got it. Yeah, interesting. I think, yeah, it is a really interesting example. I think project management fees doesn't show our value. Yeah, I think it's right that it does show your value. Let me think on this just 1 second. So the project management fees, in a perfect world, and you guys don't have the flexibility to do this just given all these little details, in a perfect world, I want you to show up to me and say, hey, to give you what you want, it's $30,000, and you get all of these things included. And then the project management fees just kind of exist inside of it. Now, that's not necessarily realistic. And in some cases, like 2 interpreters, 2 dinner nights, like I'm going to be comparing this number against one of your competitors, right? And so that gets a little bit problematic. But I think that there's a world where the project management fees for some of your customers are almost like, they're almost like included and the prices are a little bit higher. And then you just, maybe if you get an objection, you say, yeah, our prices are a little bit higher, but they're not going to do this, they're not going to do this, they're not going to do that, because then it kind of hides it a little bit. And what I mean by that is your customer who says they can do it internally, it's like you can kind of overwhelm them a little bit with like, okay, so these are all the things that we can do. Yeah, and I think Deborah, you're bringing up a good point where it's like I do think detail more of the added value, because when you say something like planning or organizing schedules or processing payments, I think of like, oh, of course I can do it, right? Of course I can like do those things. I have to do those things every day, but I don't realize like how much actual planning this is going to be, how much actually organization it's going to be. But it's almost like instead of project managing, it's almost like turnkey. Like, do you want this to be turnkey? You know, it's a phrase we have in the States here. I don't know if it translates well to Brazil or wherever you're selling, but turnkey is like, we do everything. And that's almost, maybe it's like the we do everything package, like we do everything. And then make it a little bit more detailed, because if you tell me planning, I'll be like, oh, I can plan. And then if I say that, you can go, well, here's what an involved of planning is, and literally tell me every single thing. And when you tell me everything, I'm going to go, oh yeah, I don't want to do that, right? So I would give a little bit more value there and include it. And then if you can include it inside your other fees, then maybe you get a real differentiation, because they're going to go with a competitor maybe for one event and hate it, and then come back to you guys or something like that. But yeah, just some things to think about there.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. I love the turnkey. And to me, you know, the project management almost becomes like the base fee, because it's really core to who you are. And it sounds like you probably wouldn't do a project without that piece. So I love Patrick's idea of, you know, bundling it all in of we do everything and here's the price and then here's the
what I kind of love about this as well, and this is really useful for a lot of people, is like I know I'm the prospect who does this to you guys. I'm like, well, do I really need that? Blah, blah, blah. And the sales pitch that works on me almost every time is, hey, Patrick, you're spending $27,000, you're spending $30,000 on making sure this is okay. And you have 17 different things to do. We're adding 10% of the cost. We're adding $3,000, like almost nothing, in order to take this completely off your plate. If someone said that to me, I'd be like, yeah, you're right. Like in the context, right? Because it's only about 10%. I think you could probably charge a little bit more. You could probably charge 20% with that context, and just kind of positioning it a little bit differently. But yeah, I think it's pretty cool.
Great. Great. It all comes back to value. So Patrick, do you think we have one more time to do one more? Because
yeah, it's the one in the chat, right? Yeah, let me check it out.
Yeah, it looks pretty interesting.
Cool. Cigar distributor. Awesome.
The one that's not a Qwilr page.
How dare you, Nicholas?
No, I know, Nicholas, let us know if you want us to make it into a Qwilr page for you.
Nicholas said, not that one. Do you want to send the one, Nicholas? Oh, no, Nicholas, I see the other one. Got it. The group coaching, right? Okay. This guy? Yeah.
Passion to profit. Okay.
Passion to profit. I like it. Phase 1 pre-launch focus, build foundations, formation, soft launch, official launch, part 1, just lifetime access. Gotcha. The receipts, I like that. Finding your profitable passion. Got it. Creating as it sell. Got it. Some case studies. Oh, got a video in there. That's cool. I like when the videos are in there.
Yeah, I do too.
Okay, what you're getting. Okay, so I think there's some of the stuff I talked about with like simplifying a little bit up here. So like, and this is more design feedback more than anything, like phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, I would try to put this into like one slide, right? Like, you know, a little bit of a graphic that's like shows phase 1, phase 2, 3, a little bit of a minimization of the font and stuff like that, because it kind of like people, when they're looking at proposals a lot of time, and I'm not like a proposal expert, but I've done a lot of proposals, but like what we found is like when people are looking at proposals, they kind of want to see like the whole picture in a very small space, right? Because when I was scrolling through this, I was like, okay, we got probably 3, but maybe there's 4. Oh, there's not 4. You know, it's phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. So show that to me almost like, it's almost like a signpost. It's almost like, hey, we got these 3 things, right? And then, you know, going deep into some of this other stuff. And And then at the end here, okay, so 4997 lifetime access and like a two pro slash the price. Join us today, 2097. Yeah, it's a bit of a webinar format, I think. Okay, so it depends on where this is being pitched. So this advice might not be, it depends on where it'll be useful, right? So I like that there's bonuses. I think that the thing, your presentation deck, you're talking me through, there's a voiceover, makes total sense. I think one thing to kind of think about is like, you're not showing any add-ons, right? So what's really interesting, and especially with a lot of coaching, is add-ons are what kind of makes the game, because if they're in, they're in. But it's really a question of how in are they, right? So when you're showing me, like, even if you get to the end here and you're like 2997 and you get all this cool stuff and you get these bonuses, if I'm in and like you got me on the hook in a really, really good way, I'm like, cool, I'm in. And then it's like, then I want to say, awesome. Like if I'm on the phone, like, awesome, you're in, that's amazing. We're going to get you hooked up. You're going to have so much value. So I got a couple of questions just to make sure. So right now you get all this stuff, but we also have this. Do you also want that? And maybe you hint at it a few slides before, and you also don't want that. So I think that's the biggest thing. I would just have some upsells here, like right in the flow, because you already got them excited, presumably to spend. And this is the thing to think about. And we kind of talked about this with Deborah and Luciana. Like when you have someone excited, like an extra $3,000 or contextual or an extra like 10, 20% is not necessarily super difficult. Now, not everyone's going to choose it, but enough people choose it, all of a sudden your revenue per customer goes up. So in this case, you got me excited and you're like, hey, 497, oh, it's actually $3,000. Amazing, that's awesome. Like, I'm ready to go. And then you could add a couple of add-ons and all of a sudden I'm back at, $4 or $5,000, right? The other thing I would say is it's actually $5,000 to $3,000. It's hard because info products and courses, like sometimes the deep discount does work a lot. I would recontextualize the discount a little bit. I would just add like a little bit. What does that actually mean, right? Because I know the difference between 5 and 3, but notice how like I tripped up and I said, oh, it's $1,000 off. Like literally add a little badge here or something that's like $2,000 off, right? It'll get a little confusing in the context, so it might not be like possible or visually pleasing enough, but like really contextualize it for me. You're giving me, because this is what people with discounts, it's like, I need to think you're giving me $2,000. That's really what it needs to feel like. And right now it just feels like you're changing the price, right? So you want to kind of hammer me over the head a little bit with that, and the design you'll have to kind of figure out. But that, and I think that like, give me a little bit of add-ons, because once I'm on the hook, like reel me in more, right? And this is something that like, I think great salespeople do that like okay salespeople don't do. Great salespeople, when they get someone, and in the context of pricing, when they get someone who's like says yes, they don't keep selling, in the sense of like, all right, like that's great, and you're gonna have so much fun, and you're gonna have this and this. But what they do is they double down, which is different than continuing to sell. They say, great, well that's the core package. You're gonna get all your bonuses. Do you also want this? You got the first yes. It's pretty easy to get the second yes. Do you also want this? This is why at like, restaurants, they're like, oh, and what else? Like they always do this in drive-throughs, and it's not because they're just nice people. It's because there's some psychological study that's been done and everything, that when they say, and what else, you go, okay, I'll take the other thing too. What else? Oh yeah, I'll also take this, right? Because you're already thinking of it, because you're looking at a menu, and when you're thinking of it, all of a sudden you can kind of push through. So those are some pieces of advice. Obviously, always follow through with value. That's the thing that you don't want to like oversell and then under deliver. But yeah, hopefully that's helpful, Nicholas.
That's great. That's great. I love the series of micro yeses, really, to get to the ultimate yes. So that's awesome.
Totally.
Okay. If there are any other questions, this is your last chance. So we have finished with all of our submissions. And Patrick, I just love all the advice that you've given. Sheldon, yes, I'm going to make this recording available. So I will send it out to you within the next 24 hours. And Nicholas, yes, you use Qwilr. Glad to hear that. And you may need to convert over as well for your personal business. We're happy to help you with that too. So with that said, unless there's any other questions, we are ready to close out today. Patrick, thank you so much for joining us. This was fun, really.
Absolutely.
Yeah, loved hearing that. All the live review and ideas that we shared, and we're getting some good comments in the chat. So thank you very much. Thank you to the audience for jumping on again today. If you have other questions for us, feel free to email me. I'll do the best to field them or pass them along. When you exit out of the survey, you'll have an opportunity to check the box if you want more information from ProfitWell or Qwilr, which means a salesperson will reach out to you, just a heads up. But we'd love to help you out as we can. So thank you very much. This concludes our time today.
Yeah.